Cant Review print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CUNReview, that is @CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunreview.com, that is INFORMATION@CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the Herald on Tuesday, the 14th of February 2023. The headline reads, Ben CRUACHAN, HILLWALKER dies after fall near summit. The article is by Emma Saboljak. A HILLWALKER has died after falling near the summit of an Argyll mountain last week. Mountain rescue teams and Police Scotland were called to the accident on Ben CRUACHAN near Dalmally on February 7th. The 32-year-old man died after more than a 150-metre fall over a very steep, wintry, broken ground. A helicopter flown in from Inverness attempted to reach the man several times, but was unable to approach the site due to low cloud cover. After Oban Mountain Rescue Team members reached the area on foot, the casualty was lowered by stretcher back to the hydro tracks at the back of CRUACHAN Dam. Others from the team assisted the man's walking companion and dog back to the bottom of the summit. A statement from the team read, "Our thoughts and condolences are with the casualties' family and friends at this time." A Police Scotland spokesperson said on Tuesday 7th February 2023, a search and rescue operation was launched following a report a 32-year-old man had fallen from a peak at Ben CRUACHAN Loch Awe. Emergency services, including mountain rescue teams, attended. However, the man had died. His family has been notified. The article is by Emma Saboljak. This is from the Herald on Tuesday the 14th of February 2023. The headline reads, Police officer accused of raping woman and child cleared of charges. This article is by the Herald Scotland Online. A police officer accused of raping and assaulting a woman and a 6-year-old girl has been acquitted of all charges. Martin Coulter, 36, was found not guilty of 6 charges at the High Court in Edinburgh on Tuesday, with 1 charge found to be not proven. The jury of 9 men and 6 women took under 4 hours to clear him of the allegations after they retired on Monday afternoon. Coulter had denied raping and assaulting a woman and a 6-year-old child. During the 7-day trial, the court heard evidence about the alleged incidents, but there was no concrete dates agreed on when the incidents were said to have taken place. Coulter's defence agent Ian Duguid, KC, presented evidence to the trial showing Coulter's whereabouts on September 23, 2013, including Google Maps, timelines, bank statements and social media posts. The court was also shown records of Coulter's army training records, which revealed he was on training courses between September 6th and 21st that year. A woman told the court on February 6th she could not recall the exact date, but said she went to Coulter's flat at lunchtime on or around September 23rd, 2013, to celebrate the news he was going on a tour of duty of Afghanistan with the Territorial Army. She told the court he had wanted to have sex with her to celebrate, but she told him she did not want to because she did not have the time. She alleged he then raped her, but the court heard that she appeared to have gone on a night out with Coulter that evening. She also told the court she could not remember the night in question as it was 10 years ago. The witness, however, insisted she could not remember being with him on the date in question. Mr. Duguid put it to the witness that Coulter had not received a letter that he would be deployed to Afghanistan in September, and had actually been told in November he would be sent for a maximum of 12 weeks due to being in the Territorial Army. Coulter was suspended from Police Scotland as a result of the accusations. That article was by Herald Scotland Online.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of February 2023, from the opinion section, analysis, why Nicola Sturgeon has chosen now to quit as First Minister, by David Ball, political correspondent.
Nicola Sturgeon caught Scotland off guard by announcing she is to quit as First Minister, but her government has faced frustration from inside and outside the SNP for some time. The majority of her current and former political foes have praised the FM's shift in office, with no suggestion that she is taking an early cut. The First Minister insisted she had been toying with the decision for weeks. She was also quick to bat away any suggestion that the last few months had gotten the better of her. In her opening remarks yesterday, Ms Sturgeon stressed that she has plenty of experience to draw on when it comes to navigating choppy waters. That is true to an extent. She has been in power for 8 years, while her party has been the only show at Holyrood since 2007. Ms Sturgeon was able to almost laugh off ludicrous calls for her to quit amid the Alex Salmond inquiry and maintain an impressive level of popularity with the public. Ms Sturgeon said that if it was just a question of my ability or my resilience to get through the latest period of pressure, she would have jacked it in long before now. She insisted that the decision comes from a deeper and longer term assessment. I think she has been wrestling with it, albeit with oscillating levels of intensity, for some weeks. But the last few months have been anything but a breeze for the First Minister and her government. After walking the last Holyrood election in 2021, the SNP, along with the Greens, now a fully fledged government partner, had hit a crossroads with its vision for independence. Having been pushed back a countless number of times by Prime Minister after Prime Minister, Ms Sturgeon threw the dice on her most costly gamble of her premiership, preempting court action by the UK government on whether Holyrood could hold its own referendum. The Supreme Court was stark in its judgment, telling the Scottish Government it is out with devolved competence to hold a referendum without the permission of UK ministers. To make matters worse, her plan B to use the next UK general election as a de facto referendum is a car crash waiting to happen. But the independence campaign grinding to a halt has not itself meant that this is the time right for the First Minister to call it a day. Ms Sturgeon drew widespread acclaim for how she handled the pandemic, utilising her stellar communication skills while those in Downing Street were floundering in getting the most basic public health messages across. But the National Health Service, under her leadership, has never been in a worse state. Waiting times have spiralled out of control, mental health services are in chaos, albeit hindered by the pandemic. But the Scottish Government and the First Minister have their neck on the line when it comes to the health of the NHS. Similarly, the First Minister made education and closing the attainment gap her number one priority, labelling it her defining mission. But this gap is not closed, and the FM has been accused of not treating it with the importance it deserves. The Scottish Government has risked becoming a laughingstock over its failure to build 2 lifeline ferries, while the Highlands communities have understandably felt completely abandoned by the decision to roll back on a pledge to hit dual the A9. Party politics are important to some, but nothing cuts through to the public that the basic's not working. The First Minister's gender recognition reforms, a simple piece of administrative legislation to make the process for trans people to obtain a gender recognition certificate easier, was also always going to create a chasm within the SNP. The debate saw her lose a minister in Ash Regan, and she could have lost her finance secretary and potential successor Kate Forbes, who is also reportedly sceptical about the proposals. But it has been the fallout from the gender recognition reforms and the self-inflicted row over transgender prisoners that has potentially called Ms Sturgeon's judgment into question. The First Minister is a politician without comparison. She does not make howlers. There have never been any gotcha moments. Ms Sturgeon sat through hours of scrutiny over the Salmond affair by the Holyrood Committee and emerged almost entirely unscathed. Like all politicians, Ms Sturgeon will sometimes say nothing when it is better, politically, to do so. But the Scottish Government's 2 U-turns over transgender prisoners and remarks made personally by Ms Sturgeon has turned the row into a disaster for the SNP. She told Douglas Ross that she did not have enough information as to whether convicted transgender rapist Alice Bryson was a man or a woman. The FM finally cracked, admitting that it was almost certainly the case that the double rapist is not truly transgender. Ms Sturgeon then referred to Bryson as a woman at the press briefing and, caught on the back foot, warned against headline-generating perspectives. The First Minister may have pointed to these remarks in her speech yesterday, stating that due to the focus on her, statements and decisions that should not be controversial at all quickly become so. She added that issues are controversial end up almost irrationally so. Ms. Sturgeon said, "It has always been my belief that no one individual should be dominant in any system for too long. The fury over transgender prisoners has led to the Scottish Government and Ms. Sturgeon not sticking to her guns. By shifting from the original position Justice Secretary Keith Brown was initially sent out to defend, backing the Scottish Prison Service from carrying out risk assessments on each trans prisoner, and having faith in them to protect all inmates, the perception has been that Ms. Sturgeon has caved in to intense pressure from opponents and risks further stigmatising trans people. More problems lie ahead for the Scottish Government. The deposit return scheme, if it indeed launches on August the 16th, will throw up a number of problems and lack of planning with the scheme. The First Minister has rubbished suggestions that the heat has got too much for her in recent months, but with a host of domestic headaches and an independence campaign going nowhere, picking a rare year without an election to call it a day makes sense." And that report was by political correspondent David Ball.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 16th of February 2023. Arts and Entertainments. Books: The Darker the Night, Murder, Betrayal, and Indie Ref 2 by Alistair Mabbott. The Darker the Night, Martin Patience, Polygon, £9.99. Having studied journalism at New York's Columbia University and roamed the world as a BBC foreign correspondent for 15 years, Martin Patience has settled down in Washington, D.C. For his debut as a fiction writer, however, he's cast his mind back to his birthplace, Glasgow. The Darker the Night is a political thriller drawing on the divisions in Scottish society for an atmosphere of instability that doesn't just provide a backdrop for the plot, but essentially drives it forward. It's set in the weeks leading up to a second independence referendum, with the results still impossible to predict. Late one night in Glasgow city centre, a man hands a plastic bag over to two men in a motorbike, who promptly shoot him dead. Fulton Mackenzie, a reporter for the cash-strapped newspaper The Scottish Siren, is intrigued to hear that the police don't think that it was gang-related and decides to pursue the story further. The dead man, it transpires, was 59-year-old John Miller, former president of the Oxford Union and ex-Foreign Office official, who at the time of his death was a top civil servant in a Scottish Government department dealing with overseas investments. Detective Sergeant Davy Bryant, Fulton Mackenzie's police contact, finds a phone number on a scrap of paper in Miller's pocket and rings it. He's astonished to hear the voice of none other than the First Minister on the other end. When a video made by the victim is subsequently leaked, it detonates a political crisis no one could have anticipated. The book records the descent of Mackenzie the journalist and Bryant the copper into a murky plot of betrayal, sacrifice and moral compromise as they try to work out who pulled the trigger and what role, if any, the First Minister might have played in the murder. Following David F. Ross's Dashboard Elvis is Dead, this is the second book published in the last couple of months to feature a fictional Scottish First Minister. In this case, a combative woman named Susan Ward, who's known that the system is rigged and the only way to bring about change was by starting a brawl. While giving her two daughters and a house husband to distinguish her from the current First Minister, the author does note that she was viewed as that nippy sweetie and makes a thinly veiled Alex Salmond reference, somewhat undermining his initial attempts to draw a sharp line between fact and fiction. To his credit, he does seem to be trying his best to be even-handed on a divisive issue, but he also repeatedly misnames the SNP as the Scottish Nationalist Party, which, for a journalist with his CV, is a surprising slip. He also tries to give his central character, Mackenzie, some depth and colour with a tragic backstory involving the deaths of his wife and son in a car crash several years earlier, a strained relationship with his surviving teenage daughter, and a mother who abandoned him as a toddler. But once it's been set up, Mackenzie's backstory is more or less shunted aside until it's time to tie up loose ends. He does conjure up a convincingly recognisable Glasgow, with the tensions between the characters, such as the fraught relationship between Mackenzie and his upper-class English editor, and the uneasy détente between the Glasgow police chief and an MI5 operative who sweeps in from London to monitor him, are mirrored by unrest in the streets, which breaks out into demonstrations and riots. Overall, it's a flawed but strong and confident debut novel, unafraid of playing for high stakes. By Alistair Mabbott. Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 16th of February 2023. Arts and Entertainments. Radio Scotland Classics Unwrapped Must Not Be Axed by Dr. Stephen Langston, Senior Lecturer and Programme Leader for Performance. Sometimes it takes a joke to wake us up and show the beauty of what we take for granted. The recent news that BBC Scotland is set to remove Classics Unwrapped from its scheduling from April 2023 has done just that. Thank you, BBC Scotland, for reminding us of the treasures you've produced, serving a community of people who rely on your localised national services. But your decision to axe Classics Unwrapped is a mistake. The unique service the show provides to its audience has offered a deeper understanding of a range of music that is rarely available through other programmes. Classics Unwrapped shares the same fate as many of the performers and organisations it has nurtured and promoted over the years. Closure and redeployments are now rife within the performance industry as government and public organisations cut subsidies and funding. The Tron Theatre has recently lost £130,000 of yearly funding from Glasgow City Council, while Creative Scotland has seen a reduction of £6 million in government funding for 2023. The show is essential to building art communities in Scotland. If the government wants to showcase, develop and earn money from the arts, it needs to support, fund and promote current and future generations with this kind of BBC programming. Classics Unwrapped, hosted by charismatic classical performer Jamie McDougall, has aired in BBC Scotland for over 20 years. It is a showcase for Scottish talent, a lifeline to rural and distant communities, and an essential platform for delivering classic music in an educated and informative fashion. The programme has highlighted local festivals including Glasgow's West End Festival, Loch Shiel Festival, St Andrews Festival and East Neuk Festival, as well as promoting the launch of James Macmillan's Cumnock Trist Festival and the Peter Maxwell Davis St Magnus Festival in Orkney. Simply put, it was an integral ingredient in helping these events grow. Nicola Benedetti, acclaimed international violinist, first appeared in the programme in 2004, before she won BBC Young Musician of the Year. The relationship between artist and programme has continued to flourish, helping spread word about her musical education charity, the Benedetti Foundation. McDougall and his team have travelled to the remotest parts of Scotland, interviewing locals, educationalists and prominent artists including Scotland's beloved composer Sally Beamish. This has exposed talents to a new generation, inspiring young and old. During COVID lockdowns, Classics Unwrapped was instrumental in supporting homegrown musicians. The show commissioned a new piece for the Nevis Ensemble, who until recently specialised in bringing live professional music to unusual venues, including supermarkets and swimming pools. Unfortunately, even a worthy organisation such as Nevis closed its doors due to a lack of funding. Classics Unwrapped promotes the importance and benefits of music making through local communities. Artists first launched in the show have gone on to great success in the concert and recording platforms, including saxophonist Jay Caparold and the contemporary ensemble Red Note. Equally and uniquely, it provides a spotlight for Scotland's professional classical platforms. Scottish Opera features regularly on the programme along with the orchestras of Scottish Ballet, the Royal Scottish National Opera, the BBC Symphony Orchestra and the Scottish Chamber Ensemble. As host, McDougall brings years of experience and professionalism to the masses. He's not just a broadcaster but a professional musician at the top of his game. Communal experiences, connections, stories and friendships are all shared with listeners, creating a community that shares a love of the classics. When I told Jamie I was writing this article, he shared his feelings and the impact of Classics Unwrapped, stating, "I've been in a very privileged position and taken enormous pleasure presenting the programme that strives to be at the centre of an incredible and thriving music community. In many ways, 2 hours isn't enough to truly reflect the scene. Brass band and musical theatre are two very important musical strands in Scotland. I'd love to reflect that more. Likewise, our Scottish jazz scene is flourishing. Advocates like saxophonist Tommy Smith, soloist and creator of the Scottish National Jazz Orchestra, is a regular contributor to Classics Unwrapped and Jazz Nights, another Radio Scotland production facing the chop. Presented by Sean H. Aiken, who, like Jamie, is one of Scotland's most popular and versatile performers. The irreplaceable combination of national, local and cross-artistic cultures brings together an aspect of our music industry that has a place in our diverse and multicultural Scottish society. Jazz Nights regularly features Scottish artists mingling with their international colleagues. In 2021, the programme previewed highly acclaimed Paul Towndro's new album Deepening the River, where music and rhythms from other cultures collide. The album creatively explores musical connections with the Mississippi and the Ganges, as well as the Clyde itself. This was an important stepping stone for Scottish jazz, a demonstration of the incredible talent available within a small nation. These programmes uniquely place amateur and professional musicians side by side, working together to create distinctive local and nationally recognised stories of artistic beauty, shared over the airwaves to an appreciative audience. They provide a unique and valuable service to its audience and offers a deeper understanding of a range of music that is rarely available through other programmes. It's an important way to preserve and promote homegrown music and cultures, and its dedicated audience will be disappointed with the cancellation. The BBC is likely to replace the gaps left behind through other programming strategies, but plugging the gap isn't enough. These programmes should instead be expanded, offering more promotion of homegrown talents and making the shows the focal point of Scottish arts. BBC Scotland should reconsider its decision and keep both programmes on the air, but utilise the surge in popularity as a design point where more genres, interviews, world firsts and banter can become a bigger and more regular feature of Scottish radio. Come on, Auntie, promote, not demote. Radio Scotland needs to promote its children, not cut them off from mainstream services. Dr. Stephen Langston is Senior Lecturer and Programme Leader for Performance at the University of the West of Scotland.
From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of February 2023, from the news section, Joseph Snedden died after being restrained by police, family. By Herald Scotland Online. The devastated family of a man who died after he came into contact with police and had been restrained for nearly 4 hours said nobody gave a monkeys about him in his final hours. Joseph Snedden, 37, died at the Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy on Friday, April the 8th, 2022, 2 days after he was admitted, suffering from a mental health crisis, according to the family's lawyer, Amir Armar. His family believed he came into contact with Kirkcaldy police officers at the hospital. Mr. Snedden's uncle, James Scougal, said there was a lack of sympathy and empathy from anyone involved in his nephew's care at a press conference in Edinburgh on Wednesday. Losing a son, a daughter or loved one is difficult at the best of times, but there was no sympathy or empathy. Nobody seemed to give a monkeys, he said. His family said they'd received no clear details on how he died since that day. Mr. Snedden's mother, Jane Snedden, said the family had been devastated by her son's death. She said, "We've been devastated by this. The girls aren't eating, they aren't sleeping. When we went down to the hospital, they had given us some sort of clue. They just told us he took a turn for the worse, his heart had stopped. He was up around 4:15 on the Thursday, drinking a bottle of Lucozade and eating a packet of crisps. He was confused, but he was happy. All I want is answers as to what happened to my son and why he isn't at home with me and his family. There is no reason why he shouldn't be with his sons now. I want to know who was in contact with Joe during the 4 hours he was strapped to a hospital bed, obviously afraid and wanting to go home. I want them to look me in the eye and tell me how they thought this was okay to happen. Joe didn't die from drink, drugs or ill health. He died through negligence of hospital staff and police. If they have any decency at all, they should hold up their hands and say they got it wrong." Mr. Snedden's family was told in the early hours of Friday, April the 8th, that his heart stopped and medics worked on him for half an hour but could not bring him back. The family was called to the hospital in the early hours and saw 2 police officers at the nurse's station, which was close to his bed. Police phoned later that day to tell the family they would be visiting, but at 4:07 p.m. on April the 8th, local police said it would be taken out of their hands and was with the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner, PIRC, who investigates deaths in police custody. The family claimed they were told it was complicated when they asked if Mr. Snedden's death had been treated as a death in custody. They were not told where Mr. Snedden's body was taken to, and it took their funeral director to tell the family he had been taken to Edinburgh. In November, the family was told his cause of death was sudden death with a man with significant acidosis, following a prolonged period of struggling and restraint. The family finally obtained a copy of the redacted post-mortem examination report, showing Mr. Snedden had been restrained for at least a 4-hour period and had been very agitated and extensively fighting against the restraints. Mr. Snedden was just 8 stone 2 pounds, 52 kilograms, despite being 6 foot 3 inch at the time of his death, and had a total of 34 separate injuries. He had 2 sons, aged 3 and 15. On Wednesday morning, the family had a meeting with the Lord Advocate, Dorothy Bain KC, regarding Mr. Snedden's case. Ms. Bain said, "I would like to thank the Snedden family for meeting with me and for sharing their experiences. I was able to update them on the initial and ongoing investigation into Joseph's death, and I listened carefully to what they had to say. The Crown is committed to the thorough and effective investigation of all deaths which occur in legal history. The Crown have engaged and updated the family in the course of the investigation and are committed to continuing to do so as the investigation continues." Mr. Anmar said the family of Joseph Snedden welcomed today's meeting with the Lord Advocate. The Lord Advocate was told by the family that they have been tortured by the lack of information as to how and why Joseph Snedden met his death. He said, 21 pages of the post-mortem had 11 pages totally redacted. The Lord Advocate said the narrative of restraint of Joseph Snedden is critical to determining if there is any potential criminality on behalf of the police officers, security guards, and the Victoria Hospital, and the Crown Office wanted to ensure that the narrative was accurate and nothing interfered with the integrity of the investigation. Mr. Anmar said the family had told the Lord Advocate they have no confidence in the ability of the PIRC to deliver a robust and impartial investigation. He added, the Lord Advocate promised the family a robust and independent investigation. The family are aware that the police officers left the hospital to return to Kirkcaldy Police Office and were allowed to sit together. They also know now that following Joseph's death, the CID were involved in searching Joseph's house. They believe this was done with the intention of trying to smear Joseph following his death. Which senior police officer at Police Scotland instructed the CID to search for such information? Did Police Scotland really think that Joseph's life was so cheap that his family would just walk away? The Snedden family are determined to fight for justice and the truth for Joseph, no matter how long it takes. And that report was taken from the Herald Scotland Online. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of February 2023, from the news section, killer William McDowell dies less than a year into life sentence. Report by Emma Sabliak. A man who murdered his lover and her 3-year-old son in 1976 has died in prison less than 5 months after he was convicted. William McDowell, 81, was sentenced to life in prison last year after he was found guilty of killing both Renee McRae and her son Andrew more than 45 years ago. Police confirmed an 81-year-old man has died at Forth Valley Royal Hospital. Detectives have never found the bodies of the 36-year-old mother or her son, 3. After he was found guilty following a trial at the High Court in Inverness in September, detectives urged the killer to disclose what he did with them so they can be provided with the dignity they deserve. But despite the appeal, he never did, and the location of the bodies remains a mystery. On Wednesday, Detective Chief Inspector Brian Geddes, who helped bring McDowell to justice, urged anyone who could assist to contact police. Renee and Andrew's bodies have not been found, and recent attempts to encourage William McDowell to do the right thing and share any knowledge he may have which could assist the police were unsuccessful, he said. I would urge anyone who may have information about where Renee and Andrew are to come forward so they can be provided with the dignity they deserve. McDowell was sentenced just moments after the jury found him guilty of all counts in September. As Judge Lord Armstrong handed McDowell a minimum of 30 years in prison, sealing his fate to die behind bars, he told the killer, "These murders appear to have been premeditated, planned and carried out in the most calculated way, not as a spontaneous event or spur of the moment. These appear, in effect, to have been executions. You murdered your victims and then disposed of their bodies and personal effects, including the boy's pushchair. You didn't take steps to conceal the crimes you had committed." As well as being convicted of the murders, McDowell was also found guilty of attempting to defeat the ends of justice by disposing of their bodies and personal effects. Authorities had suspected him a number of times as having involvement in the disappearance, but it was only last year that the then frail McDowell was brought to trial. The jury of 7 men and 8 women took just under 4 hours to come to their conclusion, and, as their verdict was read out, there were gasps in the courtroom. During the trial, The court heard McDowell, who moved to Penrith, Cumbria, killed or abducted Mrs. McRae and her son in a lay-by in E9 near Galmagary, south of Inverness, on November the 12th, 1976. McDowell and Mrs. McRae, a mother of two who was separated from her husband, had been having an affair for more than 4 years when she vanished, with McDowell having been questioned numerous times about his connection to the estranged wife of his former boss. During his first police interview, he refused to admit any association with her, only revealing this in a second interview later the same day. Even when the case came to trial, McDowell, who was brought into court each day in a wheelchair by his wife Rosemary, had claimed the crime, if it did happen, was committed by someone else. On the night Mrs. McRae and her young son were last seen, the court heard of a blood-curdling scream just a few hundred yards from the lay-by where a BMW would be found, burnt out. The jury were told by Advocate Deputy Alex Prentice that it was the last utterance of Rennie McRae while alive. A Police Scotland spokesman said on Wednesday, around 11:05am on Wednesday, 15th of February 2023, officers were made aware of the death of an 81-year-old man at Forth Valley Royal Hospital. The death has not been treated as suspicious, and a report will be submitted to the Procurator Fiscal. During the trial, McDowell's wife Rosemary told the jury of his ill health. He has a very sick liver, very sick kidneys, and his heart is trying very hard to keep him alive, she said. He's actually a walking dead man, and he has a DNR, do not resuscitate, set up already. And that report was by Emma Sabliak. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of February 2023, from the news section. Nicholas Rossi, US fugitive has bail request rejected over flight risk, by Emma Sabliak. A rape suspect facing extradition to the US has had a fresh request for bail denied over concerns he continues to be at significant flight risk. Nicholas Rossi tried to con the Scottish courts last year into believing he was Arthur Knight, an Irish orphan who had never been to the US. But, after 11 months of court hearings, a sheriff ruled he was Rossi, a 36-year-old man that American authorities were seeking in connection with sexual assault charges. It has been alleged he faked his own death in 2020 and fled to Scotland to evade prosecution before he was arrested in December 2021. At a hearing at the Edinburgh Sheriff Court on Wednesday, Mungo Bovey Casey, defending, requested that Rossi, who appeared before the court in a wheelchair and wearing a face mask, be granted bail until extradition proceedings are concluded. The lawyer said being held in custody has a very serious impact on Rossi. Mr. Bovey told the court the tenancy that Rossi and his wife, Miranda, have is coming to an end, and therefore she is facing losing her accommodation at a time when she is facing a health crisis. Mr. Bovey said his client, whom he still refers to as Mr. Knight, had been subject to special security measures in HMP Edinburgh, and his electric wheelchair was removed from him within the prison, with the effect of limiting his mobility and quality of life. Mr. Bovey insisted the couple would offer a number of security provisions if Rossi was to be granted bail, including for him to wear a tag or be subject to a curfew, or for Miranda to surrender her passport, adding that his client does not own one. The circumstances of the case are such that there is no need for him to continue in custody, and no significant risk of him absconding, Mr. Bovey said. But Sheriff Christopher Dixon denied the request, saying Rossi still posed a substantial risk of absconding and remanded him in custody. Wednesday's evidential hearing was called to address Rossi's identity in relation to a second extradition request from US authorities. The request is connected to a second rape allegation, which was brought to the Scottish Court's attention during Rossi's formal identification hearing in November last year. Advocate Deputy Paul Harvey told the court, "The person that the US seek in the first extradition request is the same person they seek in the second request. The Americans are quite clear they want the same person. It's one person and two requests." Sheriff Dixon confirmed before the court that both the first and second extradition requests are in relation to the same person who is wanted by the US. "I find the person appearing before me is Nicholas Rossi, who is the person who is wanted for extradition by the US, he added. Earlier, Rossi made several attempts to talk to Sheriff Dixon himself, during proceedings and was told to shush by the court clerk, to which he snapped, "Don't tell me to shush." The court was adjourned until Friday, when it would be discussions and court documents required for proceedings, including NHS Scotland and Scottish Prison Service medical records for Rossi. The full extradition hearing for both requests is expected to happen on March the 6th, and that report was by Emma Sabliak. From the Herald Scotland, Wednesday the 15th of February 2023, from the sports section, let's enjoy Scotland's free-flowing rugby while it lasts, by Martin Hannon. It's a very good time to be a supporter of Scotland's men's national team at the moment. Put it this way, if before the Guinness Six Nations someone had offered us victories over England and Wales with 9 tries and some champagne rugby, we would have bitten off their hands for such an outcome. At times on Saturday in the second half, Scotland played really scintillating stuff, and Finn Russell showed just how he can orchestrate brilliance from his fellow backs. I'm amazed more hasn't been written about his resurgence as a player and as a man after the birth of his baby daughter, and, as he told the press after Saturday's game, he's getting on better with Gregor Townsend than ever before. And that's another thing that wasn't really highlighted. His offload out the back for Kelstern's first try reminded me instantly of the Tooney flip, the offload perfected by Townsend, which so memorably set up Gavin Hastings for the clinching try against France in 1995. That Russell is copying Townsend's classic offload move is a very good sign for Scotland, especially when Russell says, as he did on Saturday, that offloads are the easy bit. Easy? Well, only if you've practiced it 10,000 times. Yet we shouldn't get carried away. I hate to be curmudgeonly, but the fact is that Wales were poor over the 80 minutes, though don't forget they dominated possession in the first half and could have been leading at half time if Rio Dyer hadn't dropped that pass with a line in sight. George Turner's correct sin binning was a bad error by an otherwise excellent player, and can somebody tell me why George North was allowed to continue when he was clearly showing the effects of that collision? The loss of Stuart Hogg might also have turned things around against Scotland, but Blair Kinghorn settled into the fullback role as if to the manner born, showing why his versatility is a vital asset for Scotland. I have to conclude that if we play against France and Ireland in the way we played against Wales in the first half, we will lose and lose heavily, as they will not be as flagrantly inaccurate in attack as Wales were. Still, once Scotland hit their stride on Saturday, they were good as any side in the world at the moment, and yes, I include South Africa and the All Blacks in that assessment. Let's just enjoy it while we can, because obviously we're still to face massive tasks against France and Ireland. Their classic match of the weekend showed just why there are numbers 1 and 2 in the World Rugby rankings, though I have to admit I was a trifle disappointed that both sides indulged in a lot of safety first play, and neither showed the creativity that Scotland did at Twickenham in the second half at Murrayfield on Saturday. This being Scotland, it wouldn't be Scotland if there wasn't an argument about something or other, and there has been a lot of sniping about the fact that Gregor Townsend has been prepared to play foreigners in the squad. Criticism on social media from English and Irish fans just made me laugh. The Vunipolas and Bundy Aki, anyone? But some Scottish fans also expressed misgivings, though not after the performances over the last fortnight of Duhan van der Merwe and Kyle Stern in particular. Others pointed out that the likes of Stuart Hogg, Finn Russell and Chris Harris have to ply their trade in England and France, which means that, as is happening with Russell this coming weekend, they have to go back to their clubs during the Six Nations. I get that point, but it is unfair to the players who are professionals with a short career must go where they can to earn the best money. As a young foot soldier in the football Tartan Army, I recall watching Scotland beat Wales and qualify for the 1978 World Cup in Argentina. Of the 12 men on the pitch for Scotland last night, no fewer than 9 played for English clubs, though to be fair, Kenny Dalglish had only been transferred from Celtic to Liverpool for a then British record fee just 2 months previously. Alan Ruff, Sandy Jardine and Tom Forsyth were the only home-based Scots, but to assure you from personal experience, nobody doubted the intense Scottishness of that side, even during the disastrous World Cup campaign. There was even the thought that playing in England made the Scots better players because the level of competition there was so much higher. The point is that the Scottish Rugby Union just cannot afford the wages of all the squad to play in Scotland, and our player resources are such that we need to have imports such as Jack Dempsey, and, while it would be ideal for Finn Russell to play for Glasgow Warriors again, that's not going to occur soon. And yes, I believe playing in France has made him a better player, just as happens with a certain Gregor Townsend. And that article was by Martin Hannan. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 17th of February 2023, from the sports section, golf. Tiger Woods finishes first round back with 3 straight birdies. Tiger Woods marked his return to competitive action with a closing trio of birdies as he carded 69 during the first round of the Genesis Invitational. The tournament host was 5 strokes back from co-leaders Max Homa and Keith Mitchell at Riviera Country Club, after not having played an event without the use of a cart since last summer's Open Championship, when he missed the cut at St Andrews. The 47-year-old's legs held up on a day where he mixed 5 birdies with 3 bogeys on a mild California afternoon. I was able to fight back and get it going, Woods said after play. It was a nice finish. Fans at Riviera got to see Woods play alongside close friends Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy, with the trio all birdieing the 18th. McIlroy continued his mission to replace Scotty Scheffler at the head of the rankings. The 33-year-old shot an opening 4 under 67 to be 3 strokes back, while Scheffler could only manage 70. Victory for McIlroy would see him overhaul the American regardless of the latter's result, while outright third place would be good enough for the Northern Irishman, unless Scheffler finishes in the top 25, or John Ram wins, or is outright second. Ram was third with 65, 1 stroke behind the co-leaders, heading into the second round. And that report was unattributed.
The Herald on the 17th of February and the Voices section. Issue of the day. Are terms like mother, father and parent harmful? By Maureen Sugden. A new research paper calls for the phasing out of binary terms such as male, female, mother, father and hosts of other words that it brands harmful in scientific fields to make way for inclusive terminology. What's going on? The Ecology and Evolutionary Biology (EEB) language project funded by scientists in the United States to create a platform for compiling resources and bringing together scientists to understand the impact language can have on inclusion, has penned a new paper that declares much of Western science is rooted with colonialism, white supremacy and patriarchy, which continues to permeate our scientific culture. It advises that to address this history, harmful scientific terms should be replaced to foster inclusion. Harmful terms such as, the group is calling on the scientific field to use alternative words such as male and female, mother and father, replacing them with sperm producing and egg producing for male and female, while parent, egg donor and sperm donor should be used for the other terms. Anything else? The University of British Columbia, whose scientists are involved in the project, say it boils down to a re-evaluation of some terminology, saying terms like fitness are not only harmful to some people in an ableist context, but also vague. Words in the firing line. Optimization can be misleading, apparently, as it perpetuates the idea that a species is evolving towards a defined permanent optimum, when there is no true species-wide optimization. To use the expression blind is not advised, as it is a disability metaphor, and awareness ought to be referenced instead. While feminized implies that feminine and masculine are biological traits rather than social constructs. Other harmful terms are man-woman, which are described as highly anthropomorphic, while the expression survival of the fittest evokes eugenics, ableism and social Darwinism, and should be replaced with references to natural selection. Dr. Caitlin Gaynor, an author on the paper, said the project started as a Twitter conversation among a few people discussing potentially harmful terminology. It was important for us to think through one tractable approach that people can take in their work at an individual level to make thoughtful choices moving forward. Reaction. British scientist Professor Richard Dawkins told The Telegraph the only possible response to the advice is contemptuous ridicule, adding that he shall continue to use every one of these prohibited words. That was by Maureen Sugden.
The Herald, Monday the 20th of February 2023. News. Scotland military. Honour at last for prisoner of war, buried in unmarked grave. This article is by Craig Williams. A Scots prisoner of war is to be honoured with a memorial service nearly 40 years after he died in obscurity in an English town. Piper James McLean served in the Far East with the 2nd Battalion of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders during the Second World War. He was buried in a communal grave in Crawley, West Sussex, after he died alone at his home in the town in 1984. He was one of 2 pipers who marched the famous regiment over the Johor-Singapore Causeway before it was blown up by retreating British forces in January 1942 to stall the Japanese advancement into Singapore. The sad circumstances behind the serviceman's burial were uncovered by his granddaughter, who began researching her family history following the death of her mother in 2021. Serena Gear, who lives in Dorset, was told very little about her grandfather's life by her grandmother. She told the Herald she is still trying to fill in the gaps. My mum passed away a year ago. She didn't know her dad growing up. Her parents split up when she was about 8 or 9. For whatever reason, there was no contact. But after my mum passed away, I started researching my family history and finally found information on my grandfather. It's just been such a journey in the last year and a half. When we were growing up, my gran always said my granddad had been a prisoner of war in Japan, but that was all she really said about him. She never said anything else. So we were always under the pretense that he was still in Scotland. We traced him to Crawley, where he was found. We don't know the circumstances as to how he ended up there. I'm still trying to fill the gaps in on that one. We got his death certificate, and from there, Crawley Borough Council confirmed that he was buried in a grave in Snell Hatch Cemetery. I was told it was a communal grave. Ms. Gear has since learned the Rutherglen-born serviceman spent 4 years being held in various prisons, such as the notorious Shanghai prison, which housed many of the thousands of Allied prisoners of wars sent to work on the Burma-Thailand Railway, known as the Death Railway. He also escaped death on multiple occasions after 3 prisoner of war transport ships he was on, the Hofuku Mura, the Orioka Maru, and the Inura Maru, were badly damaged or sunk by American aircraft. Following his repatriation, Ms. Gear believes her grandfather returned to Glasgow before spending time living in Campbelltown and Stirling prior to moving south of the border. Since learning of the circumstances of his burial, Ms. Gear has successfully petitioned and campaigned for help from military groups and local politicians to pay for a proper headstone for her grandfather and organised for her grandfather's death and final resting place to be properly commemorated. Now, thanks to Ms. Gear's tireless efforts, a service to commemorate Piper McLean's life will take place at her grandfather's unmarked grave at Snell Hatch Cemetery in Crawley. Much to the delight and disbelief of Ms. Gear, the service in April will be attended by veterans from her grandfather's own regiment, after she enlisted the support of the Grangemouth branch of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, who also contributed to the cost of her grandfather's headstone. Of the service, Ms. Gear said there are 9 veterans coming down from the Grangemouth branch. 2 standard bearers, a piper, and a bugler will also be there. After the service, the piper will be playing the tunes my grandfather piped the men over the causeway with in Singapore. It is becoming a really touching service to commemorate him. Members of the Royal British Legion are scheduled to attend, alongside the Mayor of Crawley, members of Crawley Borough Council and Henry Smith, MP for Crawley. Mr. Smith said it was very sad that Piper James Maclean passed away in obscurity in Crawley in the 1980s, and I paid tribute to his granddaughter researching his life of service whilst in the Argyll and Southern Highlanders during the Second World War. As representatives of the town he last called home, I'm pleased we now have an opportunity to mark his life and his resting place in acknowledgement. As preparations continue for the service, Ms. Gear said her late mother, as a proud Scot, would be over the moon to learn a memorial service will be held in her father's honour. She added, I am very emotional. I'm proud of who he was, not that I ever met him. I'm also so proud of the recognition I think he deserved. I think anybody that fights for our country, whether they died in combat or after, like my grandfather, they deserve to be remembered. I wanted it to be Scottish and focus on what he was as an Argyll, and I wanted it to focus on what he and all of them went through. My mum was so proud of her Scottish heritage, and my nan was a fierce Scottish woman as well, so my mum would be over the moon that this was happening. It feels to me that I'm doing this for her as well, because it was her father. I feel like it's something I need to do. This article is by Craig Williams. Hello, this is your reader Jackie on Monday the 20th of February 2023. News. SNP Commons leader Stephen Flynn sympathetic to ditching monarchy. This article is by Martin Williams. The SNP's Westminster chief has said he is quite sympathetic to the ditching of the monarchy to enable Scotland to become a republic, as he dismissed claims that Nicola Sturgeon's resignation could allow Labour to sweep to power at Westminster. Stephen Flynn, the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons since December after Ian Blackford stepped down, said the move to a republic would have to be an evolutionary process and would have to be sanctioned by the people of Scotland. The Aberdeen South MP said he was gutted that Nicola Sturgeon had decided to step down, adding that he only found out about her decision on the morning of her announcement at Bute House. He has already said he has no intention of putting himself forward for the SNP leadership. His commentary on Scotland's future as an independent country came after film star Hugh Jackman stated his belief that it was inevitable Australia will become a republic in the future. He told the BBC, I think Australia will become republican at some point. It feels natural. It feels like something that is, I would guess, inevitable, and I guess would be a natural part of an evolution of a country, you know? Asked if an independent Scotland would be a republic or if they could keep the monarchy, he said that Mr. Jackson had said that through an evolutionary process that may come to pass, and that I would probably be quite sympathetic to a similar evolution in Scotland in time. The previous SNP leader at Westminster, Ian Blackford, insisted in March last year the monarch would remain an independent Scotland. He rejected claims that there would be a referendum on whether to retain the monarchy if a majority of Scots backed ending the Union in the future. The party's position ahead of the 2014 referendum was to retain a Queen or King as head of state if Scotland declared independence, but since then some party members have called for the issue to be decided by a vote in the future. Asked further on the BBC One Politics programme, Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, if the position on keeping the monarchy had changed since the last referendum, he said, No. I'm quite happy with what's the status quo as it stands, but over time, it may well be that the people of Scotland decide for an alternate version, but that'll be for the people of Scotland to determine. He also gave short shrift to analysis by poll expert John Curtis, who has stated that Nicola Sturgeon's exit could give Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party 25 seats and the keys to number 10. Mr. Curtis said that the Labour Party had most to gain from her shock resignation, which should ring alarm bells for the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He said Labour have been making gains in the polls north of the border, but they are still 15 points behind the SNP, who are on 44 points. If voters don't budge, then that could mean Labour pick up just 3 more seats in Scotland to add to their single MP at the moment, taking their total to just 4. This would be a disappointment for Sir Keir, who would be left with the Herculean task of trying to win a Westminster majority by chalking up a massive poll lead over the Tories in England and Wales instead. But if there is just a 5% swing from the SNP, Labour could get 16 Scottish MPs. And if Labour closes the gap on the SNP entirely, it could get 25 Scottish seats. That would mean Sir Keir could win an overall majority at a general election with just half the UK-wide poll lead he needs at the moment. Mr. Flynn said Ms Sturgeon's resignation was absolutely not a gift for Labour. He pointed to a post-resignation poll carried out by Savanta that in a first-past-the-post constituency vote, the SNP would pick up 43% of the vote and 32% of the regional list vote. It indicated that an SNP Green government would remain in control of the Scottish Government with a majority of 23 seats. A post-resignation Survation poll also showed SNP in a strong position in terms of intended voting in Scotland for a UK general election with 43% of the vote. That would be 2 percentage points shy of their showing in 2019, when the party won 48 seats. Labour in Scotland were polling at 30%, the Scottish Tories were on 17%, and the Liberal Democrats were on 6%. He said the polls were just a tiny little bit down from where we were in 2019. He said all that's happened is the Labour Party has replaced the Conservatives in second place in Scotland. Now, I know that many unionists want to think that the SNP are going to go away now, but I've got a message for them. We are not. He paid tribute to Ms Sturgeon, saying that he was very disappointed by her decision to quit. Nicola was indeed an inspiration for myself and for so many others. I found out very early on Wednesday morning what was to come that day, and like everyone, I was very disappointed. I was gutted, to put it simply. Nicola was an inspirational leader, not just of the Scottish National Party, but of the Scottish Government too. Her warmth of empathy, her humility, and indeed her honesty was all on show on Wednesday, as it has been throughout her reign. So to see her step away was very deeply disappointing. He added, "We have the opportunity for change. I'm looking forward to seeing who comes forward from my colleagues in Holyrood, and hopefully we can move forward together." He contested any claims that Ms Sturgeon was not good at making a succession plan and that there is no obvious contender to fill her shoes. If you actually look at Holyrood, what we have is a number of individuals who have many good skills. They're excellent communicators. They've got extreme experience of being in government in difficult times, he said, while keeping very quiet about who he favoured to take the SNP party reins. I'll see who comes forward, he said. There's still time for more people to come forward. But what I want to see from them is a clear plan in terms of how we approach becoming an independent country. I want them to outline how they intend to deal with some of the challenges that we face at home, because there is understandable challenges at home, and they need to do that, and they need to do that in the fullness of time. This article is by Martin Williams.
From the Herald, Monday the 20th of February 2023. Sports section. On this day in 2010, Amy Williams wins skeleton gold at Winter Olympics by PA News Agency. Amy Williams tamed the notorious Whistler track to claim skeleton gold and become Great Britain's first individual Winter Olympic champion in 30 years. On a course blighted by the previous week's death of Georgian luger Nodar Kumatara-Shvili. The 27-year-old Williams steered 4 near-perfect runs to claim victory by over half a second. After setting a track record of 53.83 on her first run and shattering it by going 53.68 on her first of 2 final runs, Williams led from start to finish to follow figure skater Robin Cousins into the British Winter Games Hall of Fame. Williams said, "I love this track. Once you get over the fear factor, you learn to love it. And speed is your friend. You've got to work with it and relax, and if you do that, it's a great track to slide." Williams' record-breaking run had helped her hold a 0.3 second lead overnight, and despite fears that nerves could play a part when she returned to the track on Friday, she insisted she never let her position play on her mind. "I surprised myself because I wasn't really nervous," Williams added. "I slept absolutely perfectly and I was quite excited. It doesn't feel like an Olympic Games, it just feels like a normal World Cup race, except with more people shouting for me. I'm not very good at statistics, so I didn't realise I'm the first individual gold medalist for a long time. But I think it shows that if you have the determination, any country can be good at any sport. You just have to concentrate and do your best." That story was by PA News Agency. From the Herald, Monday, the 20th of February 2023. Sports section. Tributes paid after Dickie Davis dies, aged 94, by Herald Online. The former World of Sport presenter, Dickie Davis, has died at the age of 94. Davis was best known for anchoring the ITV sports show from 1968 until it came to an end in 1985. He's also covered the Seoul Olympics for ITV in 1988 before leaving to join Eurosport. The news of Davies' death was announced on behalf of his family by his former colleague, Jim Rosenthal. He wrote on Twitter, "With huge sadness, we announce Dickie Davis passed away this morning. So proud of his 20 years at World of Sport, 3 Olympic Games and a brilliant career on the telly. He's survived by a loving wife, 2 adoring sons, 4 grandkids and 2 beloved dogs. We would appreciate some privacy as we mourn and celebrate his life. Dickie was a wonderful friend and colleague. Rest in peace." Former Sky Sports presenter Richard Keys paid tribute to Davis on Twitter, writing, "Dickie Davis, a legend. It's the end of that era. A kind man and a brilliant broadcaster. Rest in peace, Dickie." ITV sports broadcaster Mark Pugash tweeted, "Och, Dickie Davis, the rest of us walk in the footsteps of giants. Rest in peace." Gabby Logan called Davis one of the very best, while Sky Sports presenter Jeff Sterling tweeted, "Just learned of the death of the wonderful Dickie Davis, who I grew up watching on World of Sport on ITV. One of my inspirations along with Des Lynam, a sports broadcasting legend." That article was by Sports Online.
This article is from the Herald on Monday, the 20th of February 2023, from the opinion section. The headline is, "A campaign to promote sobriety? I'll drink to that," and the report is by Doug Marr. Please excuse the reek of smug superiority emanating from this piece. I'm feeling pleased with myself, having completed dry January, plus a bit of February. It wasn't as hard as I expected, especially when I calculated I had been drinking alcohol for around 6 decades. I started as a 16-year-old in a small pub in Aberdeen's East End. It had a reputation for a relaxed interpretation of the licensing laws. True, the barman did ask if I was 18, but his curiosity extended no further. I didn't really enjoy my first pint of heavy, costing around 2 bob, 10p, but I persevered. It wasn't entirely a relaxing experience. Every time the door opened, I looked over my shoulder in case it was the constabulary checking for underage tipplers. Do they still do that? When I got home, it was polo mint time to camouflage my beery breath. My father wasn't a teetotaler, but I knew he would disapprove of communing with alcohol at an early age. New Year was the only time we had alcohol in the house. How many households can say that nowadays? Hard to believe, but my mother never set foot in a pub in her life. She was no feminist poster girl, believing pubs weren't places for women. In those days, anything associated with alcohol and its consumption was treated with sniffy opprobrium. How times have changed. The teetotaler has become something of a curiosity. A teetotal friend is almost apologetic when explaining he doesn't drink. Alcohol has become an essential lubricant at social events and even at business meetings. On rare Saturday nights in the town, I'm surprised by the number of youngsters who are under the influence. I don't know what my mother would have made of it, but it's often young females who are the loudest and most boisterous. A wee, no pun intended, while ago, I was astonished to see a young lady having a late-night comfort stop in a shop doorway. Once upon a time, being drunk was something to be ashamed of. Nowadays, being legless is something to boast about. In former times, drunks were mostly working men, usually laughed at, pitied, condemned, or all three. They have been replaced by much younger drinkers, contributing to the carnage that can be witnessed any weekend under Glasgow's Healing Man's umbrella. The so-called night economy is fuelled by alcohol. As a temporary abstainer, I'm in no position to make a moral judgment, but it does highlight our ambivalent attitude towards alcohol. I have long wondered, for example, about our national pride in the whisky industry. We all know regular consumption of even small quantities of alcohol can be harmful. Yet we are comfortable with export drives encouraging people in other lands to consume more of the stuff. Yes, I know how much the whisky industry contributes to the national economy. 62 billion in 2022. Colombian and Mexican drug cartels probably make similar cases for the value of cocaine exports to their countries' economies. As is the case with North Sea oil and gas, the Scottish Government tries to ride 2 horses at once. It runs scared of its green allies and the vocal drinks industry. Consultation on the perfectly reasonable proposal to restrict alcohol advertising provoked predictable outrage from the industry and its apologists. While we're at it, how about a similar restriction on gambling advertising? Alternatively, let's have a counter-advertising campaign promoting sobriety. It could emphasise all the positives, such as saving money. Goodness knows how much I have spent on alcohol over the past 60 years. Come to think of it, there's no reason why non-alcoholic drinks are so expensive. Let's also emphasise the possibility of having a good time without alcohol. It's better and safer to be around sober people. They're sharper and more sensible. Let's face it, most drunks are tedious company. Advertising could also promote free apps such as My Drink Aware that help monitor and control consumption. Yes, a positive campaign to promote the benefits of sobriety. I'll drink to that. That report was by Doug Marr.
From the Herald Scotland, recorded on the 21st of February 2023, Scots ferry chiefs demand more investment to standardise ports. An article by Martin Williams, senior news reporter. You can tweet Martin at MARTIN1 WILLIAMS. Scots ferry chiefs have called for better investment in ports around the nation to help curb a rise in service cancellations. Executives of CalMac and Northlink, who provide lifeline ferry services, say that ports should be standardised to allow any vessel to use them. Robbie Drummond, Chief Executive of state-owned CalMac, and Stuart Garrett, Managing Director of Northlink Ferries, spoke after it emerged that Norway's ports have standard interfaces so any operator can work to any port. Mr. Drummond, speaking to MSBs investigating the future of Scots ferries services, said that he wanted to see greater standardisation while discussing who should own the ports and harbours used by CalMac. Presently, much of the infrastructure and vessels are owned by state-owned Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited. Mr. Drummond said one of the challenges the ferry operator has is being able to berth in ports. Many of the ports we operate in are older ports that have been strengthened and improved but still struggle in adverse weather conditions, he said. That is an area that certainly we would like to see further investment over the next 20 to 30 years. But he said he would not say investment in them has been lacking. He added, so we operate to over 35 ports, and that's a real mix, as I said before, of private, council, community and trust ports. Our biggest challenge is that they are not standardised, that they have different interfaces, different levels of investment. Whatever is the right approach, I would like to see greater standardisation, and actually as the funding for changes to those ports is largely through the contract and through Transport Scotland, ultimately then I would like to see much greater standardisation of how the investment works and how they invest in our ports. But ownership is a question for Transport Scotland and ministers, but whatever is put in place should deliver that standardisation. He said that standardisation would allow any operator to any port because they have the same approach. Mr. Garrett added, absolutely, you're looking for standardisation. It means that the berth fit, the ability for the vessel to come alongside a harbour, allows you to know that what the harbour layout is. You would know that the mating between the vessel and the ship ramp and the shore berth would be standardised. And when that doesn't happen, then you can't bring vessels into different ports. A scheme of work has to take place behind the scenes to enable that vessel to fit, and it certainly makes for an easier run operation when you have standardisation. Mr. Drummond said he had previously said that it was really important to set out a long-term strategy for ferries and ports, and he said that he hoped that was what the island's connectivity plan would achieve. He suggested green was the way to go. As part of that strategy, we should be addressing how we have a greener fleet, and there's huge opportunities. If you look at the energy being created by our islands and some of that excess energy, then there's huge opportunities to use that to power the fleet in a much more green way. But that requires long-term strategy, long-term thinking, so we can evolve towards that. He said that breaking up the ferry networking in a method called unbundling was problematic. Last year it emerged that global consultants Ernst & Young had been tasked by ministers to look into the unbundling of routes into smaller packages as part of operations for decentralisation, leading to concerns over the future for state-controlled ferry operator CalMac. Mr. Drummond said, I can understand the attraction of unbundling, but running ferries is a complex business. It's very heavily legislative. And if you were to split the current network, which is managed as a network, into smaller bundles, the challenge you face is you would then have duplication of back office services. You'd have to invest in new software, and you'd also potentially have to acquire new vessels, because at the moment our vessels operate across different networks. They provide cover in the event of dry docks, providing cover in the event of disruption. If you were to unbundle, then potentially you would have less resilience unless you invested in further vessels. So that's a view of unbundling, that we don't think it would offer value for money for the Scottish taxpayer. We would encourage that there should be deep community consultation on the best way that services could be designed. He added, we as the operator have to use whatever is provided to us, and we do that to the absolute best of our ability. So what's important for communities is that long-term strategy to evolve the service to what they want. He said that any new structure for ferry services in Scotland had to provide communities with a complete understanding of over where responsibilities lie. Any future model must create real clarity, he said. There are lots of different structures that could operate and do operate throughout the world, and we deliver services to Transport Scotland. It is really a matter for Transport Scotland and ministers to determine what is the best structure for the future to deliver what our customers and communities really need. He said customers want services that are safe, reliable and consistent. There has been a range of different structures proposed, but whatever structure is selected, it must offer accountability directly to our customers. He said, and stakeholders must have a clear understanding as to who has responsibility for delivering what elements of that contract. Mr. Drummond also said that demand management may be appropriate. He told the Scottish Parliament's Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee that Scottish Government-owned CalMac was currently not permitted to increase fares on its busiest services, unlike other transport operators. But he said traffic on its ferries had increased by 30% in recent years, following ministers cutting fares by 30 to 70% under the road equivalent tariff scheme to bring the cost into line with that of road transport. Clearly, cheaper fares are going to help communities and make the cost of travel lower. That's got to be a good thing, but it's a matter of policy, he said. Our main concern is how we better manage capacity across the whole day and across the whole week. Certainly, demand management may be appropriate. CalMac said a range of options was being discussed with Transport Scotland as part of its fares review. The article, as we said, was by Martin Williams and read by myself, Alistair.
The Herald on the 21st of February and the Arts and Ends section. Masterpiece owned by Sir Sean set to fetch more than £2 million by Maureen Sugden. A painting by abstract artist František Cooper, owned by the late Sir Sean Connery, is expected to fetch more than £2 million when it makes its auction debut next month. The rare work by the Czech painter, titled Complex, was acquired by the James Bond star in 2016 before he died at 2020, aged 90. Within an estimate of £2,200,000 to £2,800,000, the highest ever to be placed on a work by the artist at auction, the piece will go on sale on March 1 as part of Sotheby's Modern and Contemporary Evening event in London. Proceeds from its sale will partially benefit the Connery Foundation, set up in 2022 to honour the Scottish actor's legacy by giving grants to institutions and organisations in Scotland and the Bahamas. Renowned for his acting, Sir Sean was also a passionate art collector, particularly favouring modern works of art by Picasso and Matisse. Cooper, alongside Kazimir Malevich, I hope I got that right, Malevich, Malevich, Wesley Kandinsky, Hilma af Klint and Piet Mondrian helped lay the foundations for abstract painting in the 20th century. The artist himself resisted being directly associated with any particular movement, but he worked closely with artists who explored Cubism, Futurism and Fauvism. Based in 1912, Complex is a combination of swirling colour and nebulous forms and was produced amongst the artistic period of the partisan avant-garde, when artists were beginning to experiment with new modes of expression. The piece was first exhibited at the Salon de la Section d'Or in Paris in 1912 and has since appeared in numerous exhibitions across Europe and Asia. Originally gifted to the artist's close friend, the poet and art critic Nicholas Baudouin, the work features a dedication to his first owner and was subsequently passed on to the collection of his daughter, before later being acquired by Sir Sean. Thomas Boyd Bowman, head of Impressionist and Modern Art Evening Sales at Sotheby's London, said one of the key artists credit with developing abstraction, CRUACHAN's place in the history of modern painting, is finally being recognised by today's top collectors. This groundbreaking early work is a superb example of the artist's relentless exploration of motion, spirituality and colour through abstraction. To be able to present this extremely rare work at auction alongside seminal paintings by Kandinsky and Delaunay, contemporary pioneers of abstraction, will make for a thrilling juxtaposition. That was by Maureen Sugden. The Herald on the 21st of February in the Arts and Ents section. Scottish Golf could have F1-style turbo boost with Netflix series by Sandra Dick. Beautifully shot action scenes, gentle explanations of the rules, and a gripping storyline with cutthroat competition and clubhouse squabbles. It's the latest fly-on-the-wall sports series. Now it's hoped Netflix Golf Series Full Swing might give the ancient game the same turbo boost that Formula One series Drive to Survive has given motorsport. The series, which dropped on the streaming service last week, follows a tense 2021 to 2022 season clouded by the emergence of the Saudi Arabia-backed LIV golf tournament. In it, cameras follow 14 professionals on the PGA Tour through all four of golf's major championships: the Masters, PGA Championship, US Open, and 150th Open Championship held at St Andrews. All sports enthusiasts are given a gripping behind-the-scenes glimpse at golf's leading characters, rivalries and personal foibles, family relationships and locker room meltdowns against a backdrop of some of golf's most desirable locations. The famous Old Course features as Northern Ireland golfer Rory McIlroy bids to seize the Open Championship title from Aussie rival Cameron Smith in a battle overshadowed by controversy over the breakaway LIV golf tournament. The series has ignited hopes that the Netflix treatment might inspire a wider audience to watch and play golf in Scotland at a time when it's already in the grip of a mini boom. Golf membership at clubs across country has increased. A range of new facilities have opened to encourage a new generation of players, and a fresh initiatives to grow the game are in the pipeline. As the home of golf, Scotland is an unmissable destination for golf fans, and global television exposure helps raise that profile even further, said Alan Grant, Senior Golf Manager at national tourism body Visit Scotland. Scotland's 550-plus golf courses already attract around 220,000 golfing visitors annually, while an estimated 92,000 regular visitors to Scotland will also play golf whilst on holiday. With every pound spent on green fees set to generate a further £5 on extras such as hotels, restaurants and retail, the nation's golf industry is put at worth more than £1.1 billion. Golf tourism is said to account for approximately £286 million annually and support around 4,400 jobs. That was boosted last year with a string of high-profile golf competitions: the Genesis Scottish Open, the Senior Open at Gleneagles, the Trust Golf Women's Scottish Open, and the AIG Women's Open, along with the 150th Open Championship, attracted more than 421,000 spectators, with millions of international viewers who tuned in to watch. While the year concluded with Scotland being named Best Golf Destination in the World and Best Golf Destination in Europe at the World Golf Awards, the first time in its 9-year history. Mr. Grant added, 2022 marked a momentous year for Scotland, with 5 of the world's biggest and most prestigious golf tournaments returning home to Scotland, headlined by the 150th Open. Being crowned best golf destination in the world was recognition for everyone in the Scottish golf industry and wider tourism and event sector who worked tirelessly to continue that success. The new series drops at Scottish Golf Points out a surge in interest, with a total playing membership of registered 280,000 golfers, the highest since 2012. It plans to capitalise with the new platform, Golf, which is designed to grow the game further with taster sessions and beginners programs. Backed by golf ambassadors, former One Direction star Neil Horan and footballer Gareth Bale, it will eventually be expanded to an international audience, with other sports stars engaged to lure people from other sports into the game. Meanwhile, a host of new golf facilities have also emerged. Scotland's first top golf entertainment venue in Rutherglen, which spans 3 floors of an interactive all-weather games, opened recently, while new RNA-backed golf complex set to open in Glasgow this summer. The redevelopment of Letham Hill Municipal Golf Course at Hogganfield Loch will include family-friendly golf attractions set alongside other leisure facilities, food courts and golf equipment hire for people to try before they buy. There are also plans for a major education programme across Glasgow, with in-curriculum golf experiences for 42,000 school children, part of the RNA's bid to make the game more accessible and inclusive. Elsewhere, golf is being prescribed by 5 GPs as part of a project to encourage patients to pursue a more active lifestyle. And in Lithgow, a new indoor centre offers simulator bays, offering learners an all-year-round chance to learn the game. At Brora Golf Club in Sutherland, there is evidence of how international attention can boost fortunes. Its 2020 pandemic appeal for financial help was picked up by international golf influencers, creating waves of support. It grew awareness of our situation, and people responded by buying memberships, sponsoring holes, buying merchandise. It was great, said club president Andy Stewart. Our projected income of £400,000 had disappeared overnight in March 2020. In the end, we raised more than £300,000 that year. International support last year, its 130th anniversary, helped secure the club's future and realise its dream to buy the land on which it sits. With membership up from 600 to around 1,000, including a flood of international members, it has embarked on a major upgrade programme. He thinks a Netflix series could help stimulate even more interest in Scottish golf. I don't suppose Drive to Succeed had people rushing to become Formula 1 drivers, but there's a chance this will create interest and bring in more participants. Scenes at the 18th hole of the Open Championship in the series are already giving One St Andrews Hotel advertising that money can't buy. Rucksacks St Andrews features in the background. We are delighted that the Netflix series Full Swing highlights the glory of the Open and the sporting heritage of St Andrews, with our hotel located at the heart of it all, says Seamus Cohen, General Manager. Being showcased in such a series allows our hotel to engage with international communities and global golf enthusiasts like never before. There is vast potential to attract new visitors and hopefully become a bucket list hotel for those who visit Scotland. That was by Sandra Dick.
That concludes this week's edition of the Herald Scotland podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q and Review and to tell your friends about our service.